Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I apologize for this somewhat delayed start. Today is the 11th of May, second day for the mega event, and this particular session is Transport India, the efficient urban public transport and facilities. And I've got here, we were to start at 10 a.m., and I do apologize for the delayed start. May I please request the chair, Ms. Nupur Gupta, Senior Transport Specialist from the World Bank, to come onto the stage. Ma'am, please. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give her a warm welcome. Mr. P.S. Ananda Rao, Executive Director of the ASTRU, which is the Association of State Transport Roadways Undertakings. Sir, may I please request you to come onto the stage. Special address is Dr. A.K. Bhattacharya, but he is not here at the moment, and we'll ask him to join as soon as he arrives. He is the Managing Director of the National Green Highways Mission for the Government of India. Mr. Abhishek Bhatnagar, Senior Director in Marketing Asia, India. I presume, no, he's not here at the moment. Then we've got Ms. Ashima Ghatke, Associate Director, TERI, India. Ashima ji, please, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, an applause. Mr. Amit Bhatt, Strategy Head, Integrated Urban Transport, WRI, India. Thank you, sir. Dr. Namrita Kalsi, Joint GM, Architecture, PD, Delhi Metro. Ma'am, good morning, and nice to meet you again. Thank you. Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, Tata Motors. Sanjay sir, you are head STU and government business for Tata Motors. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matt McCormack. Matt, would you please join us? I beg your pardon, I didn't have you on my list. And Matt, you are representing Semline Group. So, ladies and gentlemen, without ado, then I'm going to hand over to the chair of the session. And ma'am, would you please therefore start the conversation, and let's learn a little about transportation, public transportation.
Good morning to all of you and to my panelists, esteemed panelists. We are here today to discuss the extremely important subject of public transport, urban public transport. And I think that is perhaps a burning area which requires due attention from policymakers, government, private sector, and the think tank and NGO sector. Why is public transport or urban public transport important? I think the most important and compelling reason is that we want Indian cities to be productive and competitive. And if they have to be competitive, then that means that as we grow, there should be seamless and easy mobility of people from point A to B. They should not be spending hours and hours stuck in traffic jams. Because if we want to be productive, our productive workforce should be traveling efficiently and spending their time on work and not in commuting, Because it should be a safer place. I think that is from more an economy perspective, given that almost 60-65% of our GDP derives from urban centers, and so the compelling need to have productive cities, From a more personal perspective, we want cities that are livable, where people can play, can walk, can feel safe, and that cannot happen if it's a totally auto-led area where motorcycles, cars get the right of way instead of pedestrians and cyclists, right? So you want a safe environment where children can also be seen walking to school, or you are running errands walking to school, and that does not exist today. I think in India, perhaps that is one of the worst situations that we are seeing in our cities. And then environment, I mean, look at what is happening in Delhi. the kind of environmental degradation that we are seeing in our city and the kinds of health issues that are emerging on that account. And that is because we have more and more people depending on personal modes of transport. And the reason that is happening is not only because income levels are increasing, but also because good public transport alternatives do not necessarily exist. Yeah? If people have to move by public transport, there are huge issues, I feel, of availability of public transport, of access to public transport, and unless we start looking at all of these issues in a very strong way, our dream of having sustainable Indian cities 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road may remain unrealized. And therefore, a very, very strong need to start looking at this area closely. If you look at the data, you'll find that through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think most of the big cities that we have, the metros today, had very good public transport. In fact, our mode shares, public transport mode shares were perhaps one of the highest at, ranging between 60 to 70% in most. I mean, you look at Mumbai, even today, public transport mode shares are in that order, but in many of the other cities like Delhi or Chennai or others, it's started sliding off. It's probably halved today to the levels that it was in the 90s, 80s and 90s. We are probably sitting at something like a 30% or 35% in these cities, which is worrisome. And then when we start looking at the tier 2 cities, it becomes a real problem because there was nothing to begin with. And whatever there was probably disappeared very quickly. And most of this was really bus public transport. And I think without being trying to be too sensational, I think it would be appropriate to say that that sector is perhaps bleeding, extremely unprofitable. So, what is going to happen with the tier 2 and tier 3 cities where no public transport existed? And we are seeing a very rapid proliferation of and dependence on IPT, the informal sector. So you'll find tempos or auto rickshaws, shared auto rickshaws, really filling the space that should be with formal public transport. Some of the other issues, I think, are, the integration issue. We have now a huge metro program coming up. How is that program leveraged, right? Is there a hierarchy of public transport systems that we are seeing? Are we integrating well with the other modes? Is there good access to the metro system? Is it integrated with bus transport? Is it integrated with IPT? How is all of that planning out for it to be a win-win and a better service offering to the user who, if not given the best offering, may be more comfortable using their own personal modes of transport, which we are seeing anyhow happen. So I think we have a very diverse panel group here. And without much ado, I would like to invite Mr. Ananda Rao. He is leading the Association of State Road Transport Undertakings and perhaps understands the issues around what is ailing the bus sector and how that can become a more vibrant sector. So let's hear from him on his thoughts on this.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The chairperson and my colleague panelists for this transport session. In fact, Ms. Nupur Gupta has already touched upon the most sensitive issues that is really haunting the transport system today. Though the subject for discussion today was on urban transport, I'll be little bit digressing into the long distance transport also and the total bus system in India per se. And as Madam has rightly put it, what is really needed? Why are we bleeding? Though we have a very good potential, we know cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, and other cities are already carrying more than 70% of the load, and why we are not able to do on similar lines in the other cities. I think that is a very valid and important point to start with. In fact, to add to the million plus cities and tier 2 cities, what Madam has been talking of, as we know, we have got 54 cities which are million plus, if it's correct, and 10 million plus cities in India. And this is where really a challenge of sustainability and urban transport comes to play. In fact, during the informal discussions, we were talking of there are too many players, too many nodal agencies, I would say, for really addressing the transport issue. It could be urban development, it could be on Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. It could be, in fact, when we talk of road transport, it is more of a state subject in India. So we have very little to say from the federal government, though we make policies, acts, and one of the welcome suggestion, or I would say the progress when we talk of safety on transport, be it urban or be it intercity or rural transport, the road safety issue is being addressed, and recently this bill was tabled in the parliament. It has been approved in the parliament and likely to be passed in the monsoon session of the parliament in the Rajya Sabha. This will give a very good strength not only on the road safety issues but also on the other issues which we have been talking of and discussing all these years. In fact, to talk about the estimated volume of passenger mobility, we have a very high potential. It is about 9839, that is 9,839 billion passenger kilometers. Huge potential. When we talk of a transport proposal for any foreign investor or an operator in India, it could be on a PPP model, it could be on a leasing model. We have a colleague from Tata Motors. In fact, they have been very vibrant. Tata have been very actively participating in the public road transport in India, and this is very huge potential. In fact, we were also in the logistic meet where all the ministries were involved, the railways, the aviation, the road transport and others. We have these few ministries which are handling, as the chair has rightly pointed out, the intermodality of these transports. It should be really addressed, and we are now at this stage. We have understood. We used to handle all this separately. Public transport was one standalone system. We had the metro as a standalone system. We had the IPT as a standalone system. Then we had the three-wheelers, the non-motorized transport, pedestrians, others were all independent. Some were handled by the Urban Development Ministry, some were by the Transport Ministry, some by the Metro Railway Ministry. So at least now we have realized there is a need to integrate and complement to each other. It is not that we have been discussing in the morning, especially we have a speaker from Delhi Metro. We implemented the Delhi Metro, but the last mile connectivity, the feeder services, we had just not thought of, probably. We thought of later, but now it may be too late. So we have to really plan if we have to integrate the systems of transport and especially public transport in India. The share of mobility by road has been growing at a very fast pace from 83 to 85% from 2001 to 12-13. And freight also has been growing. That means there is a very clear indication that the road sector is going to improve. And we have been talking of this in different forums. Compared to railways and roadways, the road transport, the passengers carried by road is almost 70%, and we carry 70 million passengers per day as compared to 25 million passengers carried by railways in India. It is just not a comparison, but the importance of roadways, how important it is today, and it is going to further grow. And this has to be addressed at an appropriate forum, and now that the government has realized this and put things in place, there will be an appropriate ministry to handle and integrate all these different issues that are being discussed today will be definitely addressed. In fact, the mass transit operations, what we are talking of, has to be addressed. We have been talking of BRT. We had a very mixed response when we talk of BRT in Delhi. We know what happened to the BRT in Delhi. Most of the advanced countries, most of the experts are here. BRT can never be a failure if it is planned and delivered perfectly. So in order to have a definite paradigm shift in our thinking and the policy decisions at the policy level, we need to address this. I have, in my own way, and I hope you agree with this, we need the mobility solutions. And we have been talking of mobility as a solution. It should be a service. Mobility should be a service. We should talk of mobility as a service. We don't independently talk mobility, public transport as a mobility, metro as mobility, NMTs mobility, IPTs mobility, taxis, different sort of mobility. So let us integrate this and talk of one mobility solution. In fact, it is an energy intensive sector. We consume 70% and we also contribute to the pollution of 70%. As Madam has rightly pointed out, the environmental issues in Delhi have been alarming. This is because mainly of the automobile pollutions, as we know, and NDTV has been doing a very good job in really passing on this active message in real time to each and every citizen, and we have been very, very unfortunate that we don't have still found a solution, and we have to really cope up with this. And the other one is, as you have rightly pointed out, Madam, we have not really invested in capital over time. So we need real investments. In fact, in some of the forum, and we are talking of what is the requirement of buses in India, we have about 1.8 million public transport buses. It could be private and the public transport. And this is not enough. We are talking of about 1.3 per thousand population. So we are much, much, much away from what is expected, what is needed, at least just to meet the requirement of the demand. So if we talk of that, immediately, in fact, we have to have at least 1 million buses. It could be different category of buses. It could be the midi buses, it could be the feeder buses, it could be the big buses, the 12-meter buses. Immediately we need 1 million buses. Recently I was in a forum at Daimler in Chennai. We said, all these days you are looking for some business development. Today we need buses. How the manufacturers could meet? I am sure Tata Motors can also add value and address this issue also, how prepared they are when it comes to the requirement of buses in India. So as I mentioned, mobility should be looked as a service. Internationally we talk of mass mobility as service. We used to talk of transit-oriented development. Now we are talking of mobility-oriented development. The development is going to look at mobility needs. What is the reach of mobility and how do we develop? And having said that, now whether it is sustainable. If it has to be sustainable, we have to talk of different means of transport. And today we are talking of electromobility. We are driving very strongly on the electromobility. And the policymakers and especially the Honorable Prime Minister has been talking of this, and our Transport Minister, Honorable Transport Minister has also made a very valid point on this. We are paying heavily on our import of fossil fuels. We depend on fossil fuels for over 80% of our requirement. We pay a very huge foreign exchange. And he also made a very valid point. What is the cost on road transport? What is the cost on rail transport? What could be the cost on water transport, waterways? And in fact, this is almost 1/3 when it comes to waterways. Now further going down, if you want to get into electromobility, I think yesterday's papers have carried the Honorable Minister for Power has mentioned that the cost of power could be as low as 3.5 paise per unit. And if we can really generate good renewable energy as a power.
1 minute, Mr.
Yeah.
Rao.
So this could be also a very good direction to look into on electromobility. And prioritizing the door-to-door public transport. In fact, we are talking of urban transport. Now we have to go further and trickle down to the door-to-door transport. And how do we really integrate this into IPT? In fact, we are now talking of public transport, the intermediate transport, and the last mile connectivity. So these are the challenges for urban public transport. And I'm sure I would have loved to have a presentation, but due to the paucity of time, I thought I would bring to the notice of this August gathering, and also to have some discussion on this line so that we can really address the public transport and especially the urban transport system prevalent in India, and how do we go about for the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rao. That was a very insightful talk on the public transport sector in the country. Can I invite Amit Bhatt from the strategy head of Embark, who's been working very closely with many cities and has a lot of experience to share. He will, let us hear from him his views on what is ailing the public transport sector and how things can be done better.
Thanks a lot, Nupur. I think just building upon Mr. Ananda Rao's opening remark, I think apart from technicalities of public transport, one of the big issues is around taxation. And so I'll just present what is the impact of taxation on public transport. And this is a research we had just concluded about a couple of months back. So basically, if you look at the whole ecosystem, one is the application of taxes, second is the classifications, recent trends, and the impact of taxation on viability of STUs, right? So we did this work with looking at 10 STUs across the country as a kind of case studies. And then kind of we looked at the various components of taxation as well as the operation parameters of these STUs. So first thing we found was there are 13 different kinds of taxes which are levied on bus operations, ranging from property tax, VAT, sale tax, motor vehicles tax, octroi, all kinds of taxes. So you have, on one side, you are having a system which is supposed to address the issue of safety, environment, and things like that, apart from providing mobility, but you also have all kinds of taxes being levied on this kind of system. Second is that if you look at the classification, out of these 13 taxes, there are 3 taxes which are at a central level, and the rest 10 taxes are at a state level. So at central level, we are looking at excise, customs, and service tax, but the state level, you have other taxes like property tax, stamp duties, labor cess. And what we are saying is that not all STUs have this 13 tax, but there are STUs which have as high as 13 taxes being levied. Now, if you look at the direct taxes, right? So these are the taxes which are kind of levied directly. So these include which are on assets which are owned by STUs, they are on capacity which is available, as well as the revenue which is earned. And then you also have these indirect taxes, right? Which is the tax component on the items which are being purchased by STUs. So for example, buses, spare parts, fuels. So those kinds of taxes are also being levied. So you have a direct tax and you have an indirect tax. Now if you look at the overall kind of impact, you have more direct taxes, but higher revenues comes through the indirect taxes. So if you look at the previous slide, so you have direct taxes almost 8, and then you have about 4 indirect taxes. But even though indirect taxes are less in number, but they contribute more in terms of the overall revenue. So that is something which is very important, which we need to keep in mind if we are really looking at rationalizing the tax structure. Now what we have seen is that generally, if you look at the most significant direct taxes are the motor vehicles as well as the passenger tax. And if you look at generally, that direct taxes have not increased significantly in recent years. So that has been more or less stable. Now, if you measure this as the overall percentage of STU revenue, but also in terms of looking at the direct taxation, is that when you measure, so these are not increased in last few years. But what we have seen is that there is a huge variation in terms of the component of this direct tax as the overall revenue. So while they have not increased, but they do play a different role in different STUs as part of the overall taxation. We have also seen is that in the indirect taxes, that if you look at the overall taxes paid, and this is what we got data till 2015, is an exemption due to states bifurcation. So APSRTC is one exemption because of the state bifurcation, but generally we have seen the trend of indirect taxation going up in the overall operations. Now what we have also seen is that operators in general, from these case studies, the 10 case studies we have seen, have witnessed an increase in overall taxes paid on diesel from 2012 to 2015. So fuel is a major component, and that taxation is going up, even though what we have seen is that fuel prices at a global scale are virtually coming down. So there is something which needs to be looked at. And also that there is a huge impact in terms of the overall cost of fuel as the overall cost of operations. Now, if you look at, this is what we kind of looked at, various STUs on a regional level as well as the city level. And then if you look at the proportion of tax expenditure on major direct taxes like motor vehicle as well as passenger tax, and also in terms of the fuel tax, you will see the variation which happens from city to city as well as state to state. Now this is an interesting graph. It basically talks about the hike in excise duty on diesel. And that is one of the reasons why diesel is becoming expensive, even though the overall crude prices have gone down or have stabilized, is that the excise duty which is there on diesel is kind of impacting the overall cost of diesel for a lot of these STUs. We also looked at the overall impact of taxes on overall the health of STU. And if you look at the blue bar, which is the loss which the STU occurs, and the orange bar is the tax, which is direct plus indirect, which is in kind of which is there on the STU. So you can really see that barring best, most of the cases, if you rationalize the tax structure, then you are really looking at rationalizing the overall financial health of the STU, right? So we also found that there's a lot of policy distortion in terms of how taxes are being levied. So for example, there's a huge variation of direct taxes across the state, right? So for example, and there are various methods to compute taxes. So for example, methods are based on revenue earned, capacity of the buses, route type, bus type, and things like that when you look at motor vehicle taxes being levied. And this again shows that, for example, if you look at the case of Haryana, Haryana is probably one of the states which has most taxes the public transport probably to the maximum. And that is the state also which has probably the least quality supply of public transport. So how do we kind of rationalize this if we are looking at mainstreaming public transport across the country? We also have kind of higher rates on motor vehicle taxes for STU than compared to commercial vehicles. So STUs pays more tax compared to other commercial vehicles. So that is something which we need to look at, that how do we rationalize this. We also found that at many places, the STUs who are bulk users of diesel paid more tax than the retail users. So if you are looking at curtailing private modes, then the point is how do you make sure that they pay more tax than the vice versa. And then there are also issues like social obligation also on commercial taxes. So just the last few slides. So what is the policy reform that we need to do? I think first is we need to harmonize motor vehicle tax for STU across the India. It cannot be at one state taxed so heavily like Haryana, while if you go to West Bengal or Calcutta, the city, then that probably levies zero motor vehicle tax on STU. So that needs. Second is we also need some kind of supporting STUs through higher motor vehicle and fuel taxes, which can be levied on private sector, which is private users, and that could be used to kind of subsidize the operation or the viability of that. So the limited point is we need to rationalize taxes as an overall. We need to look at taxing higher private transport and in a way taxing lower public transport. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit. That I think was really quite an eye-opener. And at a time when everyone is talking about giving priority to public transport, if you look at the taxation regime, I think we are doing exactly the opposite. There is absolutely no priority to public transport. In fact, we are looking at it as a revenue mechanism, a revenue generation mechanism for the government agencies, which is absurd. And I think this skew, complete skew in the policy needs to be looked at very closely. Thank you for highlighting that. Priority to public transport can be given in many ways. This could be financial SOPs. If you look at United States, etc., priority is given by waiver of taxes, by subsidies, by priority in terms of no payment of tolls, traffic signal priority. How in India are we really, we talk in the National Urban Transport Policy, which was announced, which was a visionary document in 2006, and we talk specifically about giving priority to public transport. And I think at least from a taxation perspective, many other perspectives too, but I think Amit's presentation very clearly shows us how this is going completely wrong from a taxation perspective. And in many instances, at least for the state transport undertakings, they're actually becoming unprofitable because of the large amounts of taxation that they are having to dish out. Yeah? The next speaker I want to call to the podium is Akshima Ghate. She's been doing a lot of very good research work in the area of urban transport and public transport. I hope that she will tell us a little bit more about the work that she has done on the informal transit sector and what is the role that it plays in the Indian cities today and how we can move to a better system overall. Thank you, Akshima.
Thank you, Nupur. I would also like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to represent the work we've been doing and highlight some of the key issues in the context of the theme that we're today talking about. And to begin with, I think literally, it was an eye-opener, this presentation, and we have been talking about the distortions that have been created in the public transport sector just on account of the taxation structure itself and the way we tax our public transport versus taxing our personal transport. We clearly not prioritizing our public transport. But I think in that, one thing I wanted to add to Amit's presentation is also that we're not doing that for metro systems. And we do have a speaker from metro system. Delhi Metro enjoys a lot of tax waivers. So I think why is that buses in India are not enjoying a lot of tax waivers is a question to be asked. It's not a question to be asked to the metro, but to the government as a whole, that what is our taxation policy as far as promoting sustainable transport is concerned. It's not about one mode or the other. So as a simple example is, a parking, for example. I am literally being incentivized to use my transport by even bringing my car here. So I think this is a whole issue of, how do you actually pull people out of their personal transport to public transport? Yes, you need adequate supply of public transport, but then you do need, for many cities in India, not for all, a lot of these, disincentives for using and, personal vehicles and taxation, pricing or parking or all those things that are needed. And I think why I wanted to highlight that point is that also, it's important because unless we fix, all these issues, it will be very difficult to get rid of this, continuous trend of increase in cars and two-wheelers in our country. So that's, I just wanted to add that to the previous presentation. On informal public transport, I think when you look today at the situation of public transport in our cities, as Nupur has highlighted earlier, it's really the biggest cities that really have the luxury of having a decent public transport. I wouldn't say it is adequate, but because you still need much more, but at least they have the services, they have a good share in public transport, a lot of which is captive, not really choice. So at least we're doing well in that context. But there is this whole lot of second-tier cities, and these second-tier are not really small cities. You're really talking about the Surat and Pune, Nagpur, these kind of cities which hardly have any formal public transport. These cities are largely being served by informal public transport systems, and these are really in the form of your shared auto rickshaws, Tata Magics, minivans, kind of a mode of transport, which are being provided by private sector at really affordable price points, at really being convenient, frequent, but the quality in terms of, my experience as a public transport user is really questionable. We've done studies in about 5 cities in India to understand these systems, and what was one of the major takeaway was that yes, informal public transport systems today are playing a major role in terms of providing the mobility services, because we have none, no other service. But quality in terms of, my experience as a public transport user is really a question mark, because at the end of the day, the moment I can afford a personal vehicle, I will choose, because I really don't want to sit in those crowded tempos and have that kind of an experience. And that brings to the point of, what do we all want from a public transport system, which really these informal systems are not able to provide, is quality of service. It's also the whole issue which Mr. Rao earlier mentioned about, being clean, being a pleasurable experience. So as Nupur had earlier highlighted, access, equity, environment friendly, safe and quality is what we are really expecting as a basic minimum from our public transport system that we provide in our cities. And that is essentially going to be a very, very important starting point for us in most of the cities that we are at least thinking of, having some sort of public transport. And another important issue that I wanted to highlight in this context is that, again, taking cue from informal transport, and when you do look at their business models, again, one of the main takeaway is that they are profitable. And when we do compare them with our formal STU kind of services, we find that they are in losses. Now, the informal guys are profitable, probably not for the right reasons. They're doing many things to be profitable. They're retrofitting their vehicles so that they can overload. They are, a lot of them, using adulterated fuel. All of this is based on, our findings from the field studies. So they're doing a lot of things to make themselves profitable. So I think there's this whole question of really, this whole ecosystem that we are encouraging, has to offer, in terms of my overall experience as a citizen of a, city, in terms of my perception of a public transport system. So, if I do see these kind of systems all around, I am going to be, discouraged to take public transport. So I think it's in this whole issue is also this whole issue of, creating an image for public transport, and that doesn't, come, it's not an easy effort. You need far more to be done as far as creating this image, and that's what at least, we feel will be very, very critical if, again, we have to pull out people from, for example, their cars and two-wheelers. So at the end, I would just want to say that there are a lot of lessons, learnings from informal transit that we can actually gain for the formal services, and in terms of profitability, in terms of frequency of service, in terms of door-to-door connectivity. That, I think, some of those elements we need to kind of bring into our formal transit planning to be able to kind of, provide really quality and competitive services. Thank you.
I think that was a very interesting insight into what is happening in the tier 2 cities. I think while informal transit is offering a great value, right, to commuters in tier 2 cities in the absence of nothing else. And like she very rightly pointed out, if you are a captive user, if you do not have access to personal modes of transport, that is the only transport that is available to you, and you will access it. But like she also pointed out, given the quality, the overcrowded environment, the unsafe travel, right, the kinds of practices that are being used, the first opportunity that you get to purchase your own vehicle, you will transition, and that is what we are seeing in these cities. So a lot of food for thought. I would be very wary to say that therefore as a policy we should do away with the informal sector. No, I don't think so. I think it's in many of these cities offering a very valuable service. So we have to think how to rejig that, right? How to reinvent that to continue to offer a valuable service, perhaps in integration with the formal modes and better quality transport that should be offered in these cities. So now moving on from bus and informal transit to metro systems. A lot is happening on the metro front. I think we started with a big bang in Delhi. Delhi set very high expectations across the country, and starting with that, we started seeing metro systems coming up in many more cities. I think today 12 cities are set to have metro systems in the country, and the Ministry of Urban Development, I think, has grand plans to increase that number very quickly. So let's hear from Namrata the story of metros, yeah, and what they are doing there. Thank you.
Okay. Let me first thank Exhibition India Limited for organizing such a large platform where people from different sectors could come together. And also, I must thank them for bringing together such a wonderful audience. So, after thinking a lot, I decided that I would like to speak on the traffic modeling, the metro view, which is like a little technical, but I didn't know how to address efficient urban public transport and facilities without actually going through the entire rigmarole. So the discussion points were very large. I'm unable to cover that in the time allocated to me, so I will just cover the things which are given in the red color. Here we start from the beginning, that what happens to the city without transport planning and transport management. So what do you see in the red box over here is not a cut and paste job from Google. This box is actually giving the experience of DMRC while they were trying to formulate DPRs of more than 20 cities in India. And this is the learning which has come from this intensive exercise, and many of these DPRs have been approved by Ministry of Urban Development, based on which metros in different cities is coming up. The first phenomena that was to be observed was mushrooming of different kind of buildings in the same area without any order. No natural air circulation, bad sanitation, less availability of power, and less water. On top of that, narrow circuitous roads with no organized transport system. And the phenomena was that was observed was that each citizen was on his own. According to his own means, he was trying to find his own solution. So these are some of the problems that has been inherited in the cities in this country. And another phenomena that was perceived was that in such areas, such part of the cities where there is no comprehensive transport solution, there is very little economic, social, and cultural activity. So these are some of the actions that are taken by administrators while they are trying to solve these problems. First and foremost, they begin by the most easiest, that is not that easy actually, but the one which comes to the mind first is traffic management. That is by improving capacity of the place by road widening, by providing bridges, by doing rule enforcement, electronic signaling, and such actions. But in a complicated city which has a large history, since India is a historical country, this does not adequately bring in the reform. So then administrators try to move towards transport management by deploying more buses, reducing the fares, discouraging private transport. At the same time, they also try to keep the roads in good repair, because literally that is the only thing available by way of which people can travel in the city. But the challenge is huge, because the realization comes that the solution only lies through public transit systems. We have a lot of administrators who are trying to give transportation solutions in their cities. So let us see, as per DMRC experience, that what are the things that are important for public transport. First of all, it should be having, the passenger should be traveling with minimum time, least cost, it should be comfortable, and the journey should be safe. There should be a transport system and a network to carry that. So after this assessment, to make this assessment, traffic transportation studies are made, and then recommendations are made. Traffic studies, traffic planning, traffic management. In the DPR, it goes traffic integration, traffic environment, and transport cost. Then we go for evaluation system, that which would be the feasible public transport system in a city. In this, the most important factor is PHPDT, that is peak hour, peak direction traffic. And it has been analyzed that in case in a city where the PHPDT is less than 6,000, then the solution for that city is that they should go for buses. In case the PHPDT increases from 6,000 to 13,000, then BRT is the solution. Whereafter, only when the PHPDT touches beyond 13,000, that we go for metro or LRT. One of the most important indicator here is that in case a city exhibits a phenomena that in the first year the PHPDT crosses 5,000, then that case is fit for metro, because it's a very, very capital intensive. And once the metro rail is there in the city then starts taking a new form. Some of the land uses which were ignored suddenly come to life. There are the other land uses that start coming up. Good quality population starts shifting into that area and the density increases. There is lot of chain reaction. Another important parameter that is for deciding whether which kind of transportation a city should logically go after is the carrying capability of public transport mode. For example, the railway people may say that, okay, why don't you have ring railway? Why go for metro? Or the bus people will say, let us give the city the bus share. Then the advanced signaling technology of metro delivers 30 metro rails per hour in a station compared to very less for trains. So metro on the same, the land costs money. When we, either the land or the viaduct, it costs money. So a system which is able to deliver 60,000 or a system which is able to deliver only 20,400, that the administrators have to decide. Another important parameter which is deduced by DMRC is passenger kilometer per kilometer. So here,
Namrata, you have 1 minute.
okay. I will only enlist it. These were very important points, but then the time is short. Then life cycle cost is another important, but I would like to, here DMRC does lot of analysis. So analysis, it is for fully elevated alignment, the capital cost is 1.36 per kilometer rupees, and for operation and maintenance, it is 0.87 rupees per kilometer. So I had done a comparison, but we will drop it. The important factors for all metro is accessibility, punctuality, safety, and affordability. So maybe the rest of the things I can give in some other forum. Then EIRR, that is economic internal rate of return. This is important. Reason being that the saving of time, fuel, VOC, pollution, accident, infrastructure is quantified. After quantification, approximate social benefit per passenger kilometer is calculated. So this figure of rupees 4 per kilometer is what we are arriving at. This is not the final figure.
Namrata, you should be closing
Sure.
up.
Okay. Okay, last 3 slides. Again, it is very important.
We won't have time for the other panelists.
Okay.
Just summarize
Okay,
your last
I'll
thought.
just summarize. After going through all this, Ministry of Urban Development, after all this experience, is trying to bring out 3 main transportation policies. First is national TOD policy. Already one workshop has taken place. These policies are under consideration. And the factors for TOD is sustainable growth, where land use and transport has to be connected for enhanced transit usage and minimize pollution. Many urban tools and instruments are being used to, use this policy, in which land value capture of financing is one of the most important. Second is the proposed green urban mobility scheme, in which there are 2 factors: sustainable urban mobility, and for Tatas, there it is sustainable vehicles and fuels. This policy is having a budget of about 70,000 crores and will be targeting 103 cities with more than 5 lakh population and the state capitals. And third is the metro rail policy, which is looking at the different models of metro execution. It is-
Namrata, we have
Okay.
to. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was very
Okay.
useful.
And the
Uh,
last is the, let me tell the preferred mode. The viability
we
gap
will-
funding is
I
the
think
preferred
we'll have to
mode.
close out, Namrata, now.
Thank you.
You've exceeded the time. Thank you so much, Namrata. I think it was very useful to understand that metro systems are very high capacity systems. They cost a lot of money, and therefore there should be a very judicious assessment to where they should be placed. If bus systems can do the trick, then we start with that, and that is probably the widest network that will span the city. The next tier would be the BRT systems, bus rapid transit systems. As Mr. Rao pointed out earlier during the session, unfortunately, these systems have not always performed very well in Indian context, and certainly in Delhi more than anywhere else, perhaps they were not even implemented in the spirit of a bus rapid transit. It was perhaps only left at a busway level, and the choice of corridors and the length of corridors, they left a lot to be desired. Finally, the metro system. We should not be building metros where the volumes do not justify it. Some of the places and some of the cities or the corridors where they are being built today, I think also leave some concerns in our minds, given the kind of costs that they incur in their implementation. I would have liked to know a little bit more about how the integration of the metro system into the overall public transport fabric of the city is happening, but more, I think it will emerge from the TOD policy that the Government of India is proactively thinking about now. And as it rolls out, we'll see more and better integrated systems come about. Mr. Bhatia, you're next. And let's hear the manufacturer's view. I think the rolling stock, the bus type, has also evolved considerably in the last 10, 12 years. A lot of the initiative has been taken by the Ministry of Development. We were for a long time transporting people on truck chassis. Things have improved since then. Costs have also gone up considerably because of that. So giving better quality means that you have to spend more. And now we are seeing even better, cleaner vehicles come, hybrids, electric vehicles. So let's hear what Tata Motors thinks about what is happening in India and what they have to offer.
Yeah, good morning once again. and thank you everyone. Thanks to the chair for giving us this opportunity of talking about buses also. I have few points which I like to discuss before actually moving on to the bus topic. As we have already discussed, public transport was a neglected sector for quite some time. In fact, during independence, if you see, there were about 11% of the buses, of the passenger vehicles were buses. But now it has come down in India to less than 1%. So what we have done to public transport is for us to see. Of course, besides this, I mean, another interesting data is what Mr. Bhatt said about the taxes. Not only taxes, even the permits are there which actually discourage public transport. Recently, I mean, yesterday there was a news in Kerala that some buses are standing for almost a year for not having a permit. I mean, this is something which is there in the country today. Of course, another live example is Mumbai. Yesterday, I think there's a government policy now coming up that they have realized now that for private cars, there is no permit, nothing is required. For a public transport, you need permits. Even for taxis also. I mean, there's a restriction on number of taxis can run in a city, but there's no restriction on running number of personal cars. So this is some situation which we have to come out of. I mean, government needs to work on the policies and all. Anyway, coming back to the buses which we are in, we have been making buses since 1954. And as you rightly said, they were on trucks basically. Now slowly we are moving on to buses which are more comfortable. They are really, I mean, people would like to have. And Metro has actually given a comparison, a benchmark. So all the buses actually need to be giving similar comfort which metros are giving. So this is what actually we are working on. And recently we have launched a series of buses from Tata Motors. In fact, maybe from June onwards, you would be seeing in Mumbai our latest range of buses, which are hybrid buses. And basically, these are not only low floor, what you see in Delhi, but they are a step more than that. In fact, the low floor area in Delhi buses is about 50% of the area. We have increased it to 80%. So basically, you have more of standing space and you have more of comfortable space for passengers. So these are the first time in India when we would see a complete low floor buses in Mumbai. And these are hybrid again. Hybrid, I'll give you a small brief of what hybrid is. Basically, when we say it's an hybrid bus, again, there are two types of hybrids available in the world. One is series hybrid and the other is parallel hybrid. Basically, in case of a parallel hybrid, you have electric power which runs the bus along with the diesel or whatever is the fuel. And in case of a series hybrid, what we do is we run the vehicle only with electric power, and diesel engine is used to charge the batteries, and battery stores the energy. So that is how we are working on series power. In fact, Delhi, we did demonstrate in 2010 during the Commonwealth Games, our parallel hybrid bus. But now we are working on series hybrid bus, which we are given in Spain. Those buses are running for almost 3 years now, and they are doing very well. And the same thing we are trying to give into India, to Mumbai. So these are the series hybrid, which will have about 30% fuel reduction and almost a similar amount of benefits in terms of carbon emission also, reduced carbon emissions. In fact, government has come out with a FAME policy, and these qualify for the level 2 of the FAME policy, which is the highest level. And MMRDA will be getting a subsidy from the government of India to the tune of about 61 lakhs for these buses. So these are the ones which are there, would be there for you to see. And then, of course, we have displayed our electric range also. This is something new which we have come out with. We haven't sold any one of these vehicles, but we are putting on trials on different cities. Recently, we had this trial in Shimla, Parvandu to Shimla belt, which we tried it out. And in fact, there are some Chinese manufacturers also doing the trials in India. And you would be glad to know that these buses are at least 30% efficient than even the Chinese counterparts. So we have been able to do a lot of research work on these automobile solutions. So basically what we are working on is providing a total mobility solutions instead of just providing buses. So as Mr. Anandra also pointed out, we are looking at leasing of buses. We are trying to provide finance support for the buses. We are trying to do even the maintenance part of the buses, which is a bit tricky. Everyone can't handle them. So we are, over a lifetime of the buses, we are trying to maintain them. So like in DTC, which we have done. So these are the things which we are doing besides just providing buses. We are trying to provide a solution.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr.
Thank
Bhatia. That's very interesting. I think the manufacturer is also integrated upstream. Given the issues in the sector, they are also offering more innovative ways of accessing. So the financing packages, finance is a big issue in this sector. How to make it easier for bus operators to access rolling stock, right? Maintenance is another issue. Depot space, maintenance, that capacity is very deficient today. And that is another innovation that Tata Motors is coming up with. We see these models in DTC, we see it in Chandigarh. So there are many places where they have started helping with the maintenance side of things, which are also what we see in the developed parts of the world. The manufacturers taking a bigger part of that role rather than leaving it with the operators. Let me turn now to Matt McCormick. Can I invite you to tell us a little bit about your views on public transport?
Thank you very much. My name's Matt McCormick. I'm from the Simline Pavement Maintenance Group. Our company specializes in equipment for road maintenance, primarily crack sealing and pothole repairs. And pothole repairs is really the subject that I've come here to talk to you about today. Nobody who uses any road, urban or outside, can ignore the fact that potholes are a major issue, especially for the private and also for public transportation in terms of bus operators. And I'd like to thank Dr. Kalsi for one of the points that she made, nice segue, if I could manage that, is of the various issues that we have in considering public transportation is maintenance of the existing infrastructure. Again, our company, we manufacture equipment, amongst others, for pothole repair. And I wanted just to present a little bit of information about that and maybe perhaps speak about how that impacts your public transportation. Our company was founded about 40 years ago. We specialize in the design and manufacture of road maintenance equipment. We have about 150 employees in 2 different states in the United States. The method that I want to talk to you about, which was developed really with a specific eye towards urban transportation and urban road maintenance, is called spray injection patching. It's designed for a very rapid repair of potholes that develop in urban roads, particularly for an urban environment where the repair times, the disruption to traffic is a major consideration about what method you would use. I'll cut some of this presentation a little bit short to focus more on some of the issues that are relevant to us here today. But in terms of maintenance costs, the traditional methods, which involve using premixed asphalt in one form or other, can cost up to 150 rupees per ton of material applied. Whereas with our method, we can bring that cost down to somewhere in the region of 90 rupees per ton, so a saving of approximately 40%. Every penny saved in road maintenance is funds that can be applied for other applications, such as improvement in public transportation infrastructure. Raw materials, just to say very briefly, the raw materials are both available here in the Indian market, so no importation of the raw materials is required. The repair process, I'll just show a brief video, but it's a 4-step process. The machine does it all, and the upside of that is basically that repair can be done in approximately 3 to 4, maybe 5 minutes, and then immediately traffic can be reopened to the repaired area without further disruption of traffic, public transportation particularly. I'll just show a brief video here if I can. No? Or maybe I can't. Well, we'll go on. I was basically just wanting to show a brief video of the machine in operation. But the salient points of the Durapatcher is that it's not a temporary patch, so it's not a patch that can be done for just for say monsoon season and then has to be redone later on, further disrupting traffic as a consequence. The speed of the operation can be done very, very quickly. It's a simple operation that can be done also by relatively untrained work staff. The economy, and again, that goes back to the slide I showed a little bit earlier about the savings of up to 40% in the operating costs. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time. If I'm able to, I would like to show that video of the machine in operation, but we'll see here. Or perhaps not. Here we go. There we are.
Yo,
It's 2 minutes, 3?
can we move to the next?
Let's see here, if I can come up with there is a briefer one that we have.
Maybe we can run it after Mr. Bhatnagar is gone
Very good.
for his, yeah, we have
Okay,
very
very
few.
good.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bhatnagar, you're next.
Respected dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. At the outset, I would like to apologize for being late. Not my fault, traffic. There's a huge traffic jam on the Akshardham
What can I
road.
say?
And again, it is because of the road construction and road widening. So, well, my name is Abhishek Bhatnagar. I am Director Kaba Group, and we are basically into soil stabilization. In fact, I just want to ask from you people, how many of you are familiar with this concept of soil stabilization? You know it very well. All right, great. So basically, we make the earth stable. That is what we do.
And if you can focus on the areas that are pertinent from a public transport perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because see, here we are going to talk about the road construction. I think that is the bedrock for any smart city and for any public transportation. Public transportation move to road pe hi karega. So this is what we actually do. The merits of soil stabilization is that in soil stabilization, using cement and additive, there is no need for the aggregate, sand. So that is the major benefit. There is a major USP. Plus the time completion. It is significantly less as compared to the conventional method. We have been patronizing, promoting this concept for past 5 years. And I must tell you very honestly, becoming an MP or MLA is pretty easier than convincing the government officials for a new technology. This is what my experience has been. It almost took us 5 years and a lot of investment in creating the awareness, conducting workshops, to convince the road authorities, the ministries, but actually it has taken a lot of time. Of late, we are seeing that there is a gradual acceptance. People are accepting this concept and now they are coming out with tenders with soil stabilization. But still there is a long way to go. I would like to share with you an example. We did one project in UP. It took us 3 years to convince the UP officials, the CRRI officials, the ministry to grant us this project. Initially we thought of that we will be just, supplying the material, we will collaborate with any contractor and then we will push the technology. But we failed miserably in this. We spent 2 years wasting our time in this. Then we decided, hum khud thekedar bante hain. We will become the contractor, we will purchase the machineries and we will showcase the technology. The length of the road was 20 kilometers and the initial estimate of the department was 42 crores. We completed the road in 32 crores. The time allotted for that project in the initial estimate was 2 years. We completed in 6 months. Just to elaborate further on what all savings we did in this, we saved nearly 3 lakh tons of aggregate. 3 lakh tons means must be 3-4 mountains. We saved nearly 40 lakh liters of diesel because there was no transportation of dumpers from quarry to the plant and from the plant to the site. So these were the few savings. The quality of the road is like the concrete and the life of the road, the demand from the department that you should design the road for 10 years, we designed for 15 years. Although it will go on for another 20-25 years. Well, they were slightly confused. If you will give us such a wonderful road, then what we will do for next 5-6 years? Can't help it.
Yeah.
So these are the few benefits of soil stabilization. And another thing which I would like to discuss here, and this is a cliche, it has been discussed a lot many times, the coordination of these agencies. The coordination of PWD, the coordination of the forest department, the coordination of the irrigation department, the coordination of the utilities department, the pipelining department. They will wait for you to complete your project. They know that it is going to be complete, in next 6 months or 7 months time. They wait for you to lay their pipeline once you are done with your construction. So at times you feel so frustrated that yesterday I built this road, such a beautiful road, I put a lot of money into this. See, it's my money. After all, I'm paying in form of taxes to the department, and then again I'm getting it back. So can't they come earlier and then they let us know that we are going to lay the pipeline here? They wait for you. They will come here. Oh, it's a good concept. Yeah, it's wonderful. And then they will motivate us, encourage us. Just the other day, they will come and then they will dig it, they will excavate it, and then your entire effort is spoiled. And for this repairing, again the department comes to us. Please do this. You are a big company. You do this. You do that. Can't you do this much of work? So this is actually a very crucial problem. And in fact, High Court of Allahabad and Delhi High Court, they have taken the cognizance of this matter. But can't help it. So this is how there are some Indian problem, we have to deal with it. So at the end, I just want to conclude by saying that the time has come when we should really adopt the soil stabilization method. Here I would like to just summarize with one thing. I think you all are familiar, there's one road project going on Akshardham. I can bet from Akshardham to up to Hapur or this one, it will take another 3 years to complete this project. Had this project been done by soil stabilization, it could be completed in another 1 year, with 50% of the cost, by the way. So that is the plus point and the USPs of soil stabilization. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhishek. That's indeed very interesting to know. So roads are, of course, an integral part of the quality of road transport that can be offered. But moving back to the burning topic of public transport, I think we did a reasonable job in terms of time management, but I would like to give an opportunity to the audience to ask questions. Maybe we can take 2 questions. Are there any questions? No questions? I think the panelists did a wonderful job. And everyone is in full agreement and there are no cobwebs anywhere. Thank you very much. I think I must thank the panelists for sharing their thoughts, new ideas. Mr. Rao, who told us about the important role of bus transport and how deficient we are in the number of buses in the country. Amit, very interesting to know how heavily taxed the bus sector is and how, if we want to give priority to public transport, we must be looking at this very carefully. Akshima, how informal transit proliferates in the second-tier cities, is doing valuable service, but can we be doing better, and we need to be doing much better. Namrata told us about Delhi Metro and how they are doing the metro planning, the transport planning, when the metro makes sense, and the kinds of initiatives that are going on in the Government of India, which all looks very promising with the TOD policy, the green mobility, and the metro policy. Yeah, Mr. Bhatia, Tata Motors has always been a very responsible manufacturer. They have not only transitioned from the truck chassis to better bus models, but are also now giving us more fuel efficient options. They are at the cutting edge. He tells us there is now hybrids that are coming in, electric buses, so looks good. Mr. McCormick told us about his patching machine, DuraPatcher, and how that can be used to expedite patchwork and potholing work with roads, and the stabilizing technology that Abhishek has told us about. which is wonderful. So I hope the panel has left you with a sense of urgency in your roles and in your lives, how to be the champion to take forward the issue of public transport and city public transport. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much, panelists. It was a wonderful session. May I request Ms. Nupur to please hand over the mementos to the panelists. Mr. P.S. Ananda Rao. Mr. Abhishek Bhatnagar. Ms. Ashima Ghate. Mr. Matt. Mr. Amit Bhatt. Dr. Namrata. Mr. Sanjay Bhatia.